All right, we're going to take a whirlwind tour through some of the biggest economic ideas out there. I'm talking about the theories that have shaped, well, pretty much everything, from what you pay for coffee to how entire countries are run. So let's start with a really basic question, but it's a huge one. What is the economy, really? I mean, is it like a finely tuned machine that just runs itself? Or is it more of a battlefield, with different groups constantly fighting for their piece of the pie? Or maybe, just maybe, it's like a giant chess game, where your best move totally depends on what you think the other players are going to do. Turns out, the answer to that has been argued over for centuries, and that's what we're diving into. Okay, so here's the game plan. First, we'll look at the two big opposing ideas about capitalism. Then we'll tackle the role of government. After that, we're going to zoom right in on how you make decisions. And finally, we'll uncover the invisible rules that really run the show. Let's do this. All right, first up, the clash of the titans. This is really the starting point for almost all modern economic thought. A fundamental disagreement between seeing the world as harmony versus seeing it as conflict. So, in one corner, you've got Adam Smith and the classical school. Their big idea? The economy is basically a self-regulating machine. Smith came up with this amazing concept of the invisible hand. Picture a baker, right? He's not baking bread because he's a saint. He's doing it to earn a living. But his own self-interest, his desire to make money, has a fantastic side effect. Everyone in town gets bread. So the core belief here is that if you just leave markets alone, individual ambition magically leads to the best outcome for everyone. The best government? One that gets out of the way. But then, Karl Marx looks at the exact same world and sees something completely different. Not a harmonious machine, no way. He sees the battlefield. His whole argument hangs on something called the labor theory of value, the idea that the real value of something comes from the work that went into making it. So think about this. If a worker makes, say, $500 worth of stuff in a day, but only gets paid $80, Marx's big question was, where does that other $420 go? He had a name for it, surplus value. To him, that was profit, and it was just a fancy word for exploiting the worker. I mean, you can't get two more different views, right? One side sees harmony and says, hands off. That's laissez-faire. The other sees conflict and says a revolution is pretty much inevitable. And believe me, these two ways of seeing the world are still at the heart of so many arguments we have today, whether we're talking about the minimum wage or how much we should be controlling the big tech companies. So for a while, that classical hands-off idea was king. But then, the machine didn't just sputter, it completely broke down. And that forced a brand new, very scary question. What are we supposed to do when leaving things alone just isn't working? And what you see here is that big new economic ideas are almost always born out of a crisis. First, you have the Great Depression in the 1930s, which totally sets the stage for John Maynard Keynes. But then, fast forward to the 70s, and this weird new problem called stagflation pops up. That's when the economy stops growing, but prices keep going up. Crazy, right? Well, that challenged everything Keynes said, and opened the door for new theories like monetarism, which is all about the money supply, and later on, supply-side economics. And this is where Keynes just completely flipped conventional wisdom on its head. He basically said that in a big downturn, the one thing that seems like the smartest thing for you to do personally, save your money, be thrifty, is actually the worst possible thing for the whole economy. Because think about it, if everybody stops spending, demand just dries up. Businesses have to fire people, and the whole thing just spirals downwards. So what was his solution? The government has to be the one to step in and start spending. This creates what he called the multiplier effect, and it's actually pretty simple. Let's say the government spends $100 to build a bridge. That $100 is now income for a construction worker. That worker goes out and spends, let's say, 80 of those dollars on groceries. Now that $80 is income for the grocery store owner, who then goes and spends 60 of it, and on it goes. That initial $100 actually creates way more than $100 in economic activity as it ripples through the system. Of course, not everyone bought into this. The monetarists, with Milton Friedman as their champion, came back and said, nope, the problem isn't spending, it's the amount of money out there. They argued inflation is just too much money chasing too few goods. Then you had the supply-siders who said, forget demand, you need to boost production. Grow ideas, but let's zoom all the way in. Let's talk about the smallest part of the economy, you. When you decide to buy something, are you being totally logical, or is there something else going on in your brain? Well, for a long time, neoclassical economics was built on the idea that we are all rational actors, that we're constantly making calculations to get the most satisfaction or utility out of our choices. A huge idea here is marginalism. Let's talk pizza. That first slice? Heaven. Absolutely incredible. The fourth slice? It's okay. The eighth slice? You're probably going to regret that. See, the value isn't in the pizza, it's in the benefit you get from just one more slice. It's a whole reason why water, which we need to live, is super cheap, and diamonds, which are totally useless, are crazy expensive. But what happens when the smartest choice for you depends entirely on what someone else is going to do? That's where game theory enters the picture. It's basically the economics of strategy. We're not talking about a machine anymore. We're talking about a chess match. And the classic example, the one everyone knows, is the prisoner's dilemma. Here's the setup. Two partners in crime get caught, and the police put them in separate rooms. Now, if they both keep their mouths shut, they each get a short sentence, maybe a year. But if one of them betrays the other, the snitch walks free, and the silent one gets 5 years. And if they both betray each other, they both get a medium sentence, say 3 years each. Here's the crazy part, the paradox of the whole thing. If you think about it, no matter what your partner does, your best individual move is always to betray them. It gives you the best possible outcome for yourself. But if you both think that way, you both end up worse off than if you had just trusted each other. This isn't just a game. This explains real-world stuff like why gas stations across the street get into price wars, why countries get into arms races, or why tech companies can't agree on a single charging cable, making life annoying for all of us. Okay, quick question for you. Would you drive 20 minutes out of your way to save $5 on a $15 book? Think about it. Most people would say, yeah, sure. All right, part 2. Would you drive that same 20 minutes to save the exact same $5 on a $500 TV? All of a sudden, a lot of people are like, nah, not worth it. But hold on a second. $5 is $5. The time is the same. The savings are the same. So what gives? Well, this is the core idea behind behavioral economics. It shows that we are not the perfectly rational calculating machines we thought we were. Our decisions are shaped by context, by how things are framed. Our sense of value is all relative. They call this bounded rationality. Basically, we don't make perfect choices. We just make choices that are good enough for the situation. So if our individual choices are that quirky and complex, what about the giant systems we live in? For our last stop, we're going to look at the hidden rules of the game, the laws, the institutions, the stuff that explains why some countries just seem to win while others get left behind. This is where a lot of modern economic thinking is focused. It tries to answer that huge question. Why do some nations get super wealthy while others seem stuck in what they call poverty traps? And the big insight is that it's all about the hidden scaffolding. Things like having laws that people trust, being able to own property without fear of it being taken, and a government that's not corrupt. These institutions create the stable rules of the game that let a market economy actually work. Without that scaffolding, it's almost impossible for a country to build anything lasting. And that brings us to the end of our little tour. We've seen the economy described as a machine, a battlefield, and a chess game. We've seen ourselves as both rational calculators and predictably irrational humans. So, after centuries of some of the smartest people on the planet arguing about all this, what have we actually learned? I think the biggest lesson is that the economy isn't a single story. There's no one right answer. It's more like a library full of different books and ideas that often contradict each other. Each one of these theories we've talked about is like a different tool or a different pair of glasses that we can use to try and make sense of this incredibly complex, sometimes chaotic, and always very human world we're all a part of. The real question is, which of those lenses do you think helps explain the world we're living in right now?